I got my Nintendo Entertainment System for Christmas of 1990. I've mentioned that a few times in my unsealed videos especially. Before then, I was playing games on a Commodore 64, and I really didn't track what games that I was playing, and there really wasn't much need. 90% of the games that I was playing on my Commodore 64 were arcade-style games where you didn't need passwords, you didn't need to save your progress. It was just maybe you'd write down what your high scores were, and I kind of did that sometimes, but it really wasn't something that I started to do. There was, however, one exception to that rule, and it was because of a baseball game called Hardball, which is an arcade/simulation. It kind of walks the line there, and I started to learn how to write down my own baseball line scores, which I thought was pretty neat, honestly. Learning how to do the math to figure out batting averages and ERA, and kind of tracking how my players would do versus the computer opponent. I probably did 40 or 50 of those line scores, and I had written them inside of a binder. And once I started to keep that binder, I started to do some other things with it too. I also used to write down high scores for games that I was playing. I would try and write down the name of the games that I was playing at the time so I knew what I was getting into or what I was playing for like that week, see if I was improving any. And that binder was something that I kept with me for a long time. And in fact, it stretched into the Nintendo Entertainment System era for me through the early 90s and even into the Super Nintendo era, where I would write down what games I was playing, I would write down any passwords, I would write down my high scores, and I would try, although I failed miserably a lot of the time, I would try and map things out, like when I was playing Final Fantasy II, for example, on the Super Nintendo. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because I stumbled across something on eBay that had I known this thing existed in the early 90s, I would have craved this thing so badly. And honestly, looking back on it now, it's something that I wish we saw more of in wider circulation when we were playing games on the NES, the SNES, the Genesis, and even later on. This is a two-part thing. The first part of this, and it comes from Nintendo Power, by the way, the first part says here the Nintendo info file, and you can see the late 80s/early 90s artwork there. Looks kind of like Max Headroom with the telephone. You can see all the different numbers there, and what this is a two-part thing. First of all, it's a Nintendo Power directory that you can see here, and inside that directory it shows you how to call the Nintendo Game Counselors, Captain Nintendo, which is a 2-minute message with all the latest news, strategies, and tips of the week. The call costs $1.50, by the way. That would add up after too long. Nintendo Power subscriptions shows you where to send your photos for NES Achievers, so if you want to brag about a high score, you could mail it into Nintendo Power. Classified information, you can send your tricks in, players poll, and you even had TDD, or telecommunications devices for the deaf, so if you were hard of hearing, you could still call and get the information that you needed. So you had this directory here, and then when you open this up, it allowed you to write down the names of your friends and their phone numbers and the names of the games that they had. Back then, aside from buying games or renting games, the other thing that a lot of us used to do is just trade games back and forth. Your buddy has RBI Baseball 2. You want to borrow it, you would ask him if you could borrow it. You know that he has it, and maybe you can trade him Contra or something like that, so you can go back and forth. So here you write down the name of the person, and you write down the name of the game or games that they have. Now granted, this was 1989. People were not buying 100 and 200 game libraries at that point. People were usually owning between like 5 and 15 games, unless you were Lucas from The Wizard, of course, who had like all 97 games or whatever it was. But you could certainly write down names, and this would be alphabetical. So you have all the letters here, all the way through Z, I think. And then you could go to a World of Nintendo store, and you could list the name of the games that you want to get, and then write down the date that you got them. So it's kind of like a wish list. And you had this booklet on your person. You would keep it with you. It's not like a little black book, but it's more like a little video game book, and that's only half of what's here. And the thing that really excites me, if you turn it over, is the Nintendo Game Keeper. This right here is just awesome. First thing, of course, if you lose it, you can write down your name and address and phone number so they can return it to you. You can paste your photo there if you so are inclined. I would not do that. I was a geeky-looking kid back then. But then we get to the good stuff. Inside of this book is a list of just a few of the popular NES games of the time, and the very first looks at achievements in games. We take a look at Batman and Dragon Warrior here, and you can see the list of achievements, the list of things that you can do, and you can cite the date that you did them. And it's also for Dragon Warrior. Notice that the laundry list is bigger. Not only that, but if you look down at the very bottom, it's where you could do your own video game reviews. And that was just such a cool idea, that you could circle the scores and give your own scores for games and then kind of show it off to your friends and go, well, I thought that game was a 4 for graphics and a 4 for fun, but the challenge, I thought it was a 3. You could kind of talk about it if you had Nintendo Fun Club meetings, which were a thing back in the 80s and into the early 90s, where you got a group of like-minded Nintendo players together and you ran a club like once a week. You talked about the games you were going to beat and you were talking about the games you were going to play. It was awesome. But this right here, if I had had this back then, I would have played Batman more. I would have rented it if I didn't own it, and I would have played it to try and fill all these spots. Getting to the Axis Chemical Factory, defeating the Electrocutioner, defeating the Joker. Yeah, good luck with that. And you also list the date that you started playing the game. This would have been great, and is still great for someone like me who has gaming attention deficit disorder, where I just have so many games I don't know what to play or what to start. This actually gets me to start and then finish the games, at least ideally, and I think this is just a fantastic idea. And there are more games than just that here. If we go to the next page, we have Final Fantasy and Mega Man 2, with some of the artwork that you can see there. Final Fantasy, of course, with its long list of things that you can do between defeating Garland and entering the Earth Cave, venturing to Gurgu Volcano and beating Carrie the Fire Fiend. And then Mega Man 2 has all the bosses listed, including Dr. Wily, and you list the date that you beat each. So if you beat it all in one day, you'd just be able to show all those dates, and that's pretty neat. And there's more here. Ninja Gaiden 2, my favorite of the Ninja Gaiden trilogy, and Super Mario Bros. 2 as well. We have each of the different levels, each of the different worlds, so you can list the character you used, how long it took, you could time yourself, then also the date that you completed it. Super Mario Bros. 3, you list all the different worlds, how long it took to complete it, the date that you completed each, and then the date that you beat the game. And it says here you should use pencil to fill in the blanks so you can keep updating as your time improves. So you would be competing against yourself as you look at Super Mario Bros. 3 to try and get better. TMNT, with saving the dam and rescuing Splinter, defeating the airbase, beating the Technodrome, and beating Shredder. Not as many achievements there, but still something that's very doable. Tetris, where you go through from level 0 to level 19, the number of lines completed, points scored. I think the points scored field is a little thin. I think you need to widen those. And of course, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, you have a rundown of all the different things you can do in Zelda 2 as well. And then, probably the coolest part is that you could develop your own achievements for each game pack that you wanted to add. So you could do like Contra here, and you could list each stage and how long it would take or whatever the challenge was going to be. And you could do that for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you got to do that for 10 additional games. And again, considering that this is 1989, 1990, having 10 games plus what's listed there, so probably about 20 games, that's an amazing library, whether you're renting or whether you're buying the games to own. I would have loved to have this book. And again, I am very surprised that we didn't see more of these books, because if we'd had them, aside from the fact that they're the introduction to achievements, they just give you things to shoot for in the game. So you can it's a walkthrough of sorts. It's a checklist of things to do in each game so you know how close to completion you are. And being able to sign off when you did it and how long it took and that level of self-improvement is just such a neat idea. One idea that I've always championed in the internet age is having a digital version of something like this, where you could put together a database of all of the games and just have community challenges where you can list whether you've done them, when you beat each game. I know that Backloggery, which is from one of the two My Life in Gaming guys, I forget which one it is, and I'm sure you're going to tell me in the comments. Backloggery does something like that, but this gives you more specific challenges to do, not just when you played it and how long it took to finish it. You can design your own, or you can go through community design challenges, and I think that that's a pretty strong addition or idea that you can have in the internet age, because you can have a community giving you different challenges to play through each run of the game. So it adds almost unlimited replayability for each game. Unfortunately, of course, we don't see anything like that yet. No one has really gotten around to designing that yet, and I am nowhere near a software designer, so I'm throwing the idea out there. Someone steal it. I will not take it back. If you have the ability to make something like this, a website like this that has all these different challenges in it for different games, maybe you can save me from gaming attention deficit disorder, and I can actually start to play games instead of talking about them so much or reading about them so much or maybe even watching other people play them so much. So I wanted to show this off. It's really neat. Again, I got it for like $6 or $7 from eBay. I know there are still some out there if you search. It is a cool piece of history, and it is something I will not write in. I'm just going to keep it just as it is, and I'm definitely going to look into trying some of these for some NES games and see if I can sharpen my skills, maybe over the summer once the school year is over. Hope you enjoyed this episode of RePete. This is really fun to talk about. I love finding things like this on eBay, and we'll do another episode again really soon. Until the next time, my friends, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you later.